What does World Toilet Day mean to millions of those without access to water and sanitation? Is the Department of Water and Sanitation on track to eradicate the bucket system? Is access to water and sanitation a privilege or a right? How safe is the use of pit and bucket toilets in our rural schools? What time is it? It's question time. Hello and welcome to Question Time. I'm your host, Siphumelele Zondi, standing in for Mpho Tsedu. The 19th of November is observed as World Toilet Day to South Africa. The day comes in the wake of various incidents that allude to the fact that efforts towards ensuring equal sanitation access to all is far from over. While some progress has been made on the general provision of sewerage and sanitation services at local government level, it is the use of pit and bucket latrines at our rural schools that remains a cause for concern. This has raised serious concerns about the country's capacity to meet the United Nations Water and Sanitation Millennium Development Goals. But before we can discuss this further, let's take a look at this insert.
The United Nations General Assembly declared 19 November as World Toilet Day in 2013. Goes to show that access to sanitation has indeed become a global development priority. According to the United Nations of the world's 7 billion people, 2.5 billion do not have improved sanitation. For its part, South Africa is racing against time to meet the United Nations Millennium Development Goals on sanitations. Thousands of poor and rural households continue to have minimal access to basic water and sanitation, and this impacts negatively on other human rights, including the rights to health and education. In 2012, Human Rights Commission provisional water and sanitation hearings revealed that water and sanitation have become significant factors in service delivery protests that have taken place in many communities across the country. Toilets remain generally inadequate to the disabled and the elderly, as well as to women and girls requiring menstrual hygiene facilities. While all schools must have sufficient numbers of sanitation facilities, recent incidents have proved that the use of pit latrines in schools is not only a health hazard, but also a safety risk, with a young Limpopo learner having plunged to his death after falling into a school toilet at a village outside Polokwane in Limpopo province early this year.
My guest today in studio is Lance Joel, the Managing Director at Envirolu, and joining us from our Pretoria studio is Spudnik Radau, the Director of Media Liaison at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Hello and welcome, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Ms. Pumelelo.
Now, let's start with you, Spudnik. What prompted the United Nations to declare this World Toilet Day?
In essence, Siphumelele, in terms of delivery of basic services, sanitation is always lagging behind any other kind of delivery, be it roads, be it schools, be it water, be it any other thing. Therefore, the United Nations felt that it would be proper to actually come together and put together what they call a World Toilet Organization that would look at speeding up the delivery of sanitation services. As you correctly put it, that over 2 billion people worldwide still have a lack of basic services of this sanitation. We therefore are also operational, or we are in agreement with the United Nations that the issue of delivery of sanitation is a right and should be regarded as such.
All right. We received a tweet from Edward Chikwenda, and he's asking, how do we commemorate World Toilet Day? Sputnik?
Yes, the idea is not to, sing hallelujah and all kinds of things. Beyond the fact that, yes, we have taken some positive strides in terms of delivery, but we are aware as a country that we still have in the region of about 2.2 million households that are still lacking in the delivery of these services. So even if we are striding ahead, but we need to understand why we have to commemorate the issue of World Toilet Day. It is basically, and most importantly, to raise awareness of the need to deliver on this service, and as well as to raise awareness on all the other factors that speak to what proper delivery of sanitation can do in terms of raising the level of hygiene, raising the level of even attendance of school for our girl children, as well as just the basic fact that improved sanitation also improves the dignity of the lives of people.
Lance Joel is in studio with us. He's with Envirolu. Lance, you are campaigning for everybody to have toilets. Can you just tell us about that?
Well, firstly, let me wish all of the viewers a happy Toilet Day, because today is World Toilet Day. Well, from our point of view, because we are manufacturers and sellers of the sanitation, we took it upon ourselves to not only, one, create awareness, but more so, two, work towards meeting the needs and the requirements as it relates to sanitation. Now, that's a big ask, but I think it's a doable task. Every day is sufficient enough to start towards moving towards that direction. In our view, we would want to make the right to sanitation a reality for millions of people out there. And I'm sure if one looks at the documents that we have in terms of reports from the HSRC, from the recently released report from the Stats SA, it confirms that 1.4 million households, and then you can do the calculation on the number of people. 1.4 million households do not have any access to sanitation. When we look at the number of people that do have access to sanitation, about 3.8 million households have substandard sanitation. So they do not meet the requirements that have been set for decent sanitation. And that's a concern for us, because as the manufacturers of the technology, we are sitting with the response. We are sitting to an immediate, quick response. And we would really want to encourage not only government, but also the private sector to tap into this resource that is available and use it to respond to the challenge that we are faced with as South Africa, but more broadly globally as well.
We'll come back to your technology in a minute. But Sputnik, do you agree with that as government, that there are 1.4 million South Africans without toilets?
Yes, I know that from the latest numbers that we have, as I indicated at the beginning, we have in the region of, from the numbers that we have as a department, about 2.2 million households, which if you look at an average of 4 people per household, it's quite a sizable number. So yes, we do still have people that do not have adequate sanitation, and that includes as Lance has correctly put it, substandard sanitation, but those that also do not have just access to basic sanitation of whatever form.
Sputnik, is there then access to sanitation a privilege or a right?
We must say that in terms of our constitution and more so in terms of our mandate as a department, access to sanitation is a basic human right. And that is why we as a department cannot overlook that. And we as a department work from the premise that we have to make sure that all the basic services that people need must be accessed. And therefore, that is why we have also some work that we have done, considering the fact that sanitation has just moved back to the Department of Water to combine with water, and therefore become this Department of Water and Sanitation that will then look at delivering on these two very basic services to people that need to be addressed on a daily basis. And there is a lot of work that we have begun to do. There is work that the department was doing even before it was water and sanitation, but that is something that we can still get into as we go on.
We will explore the topic of toilets being a right with the Human Rights Commission. They will be joining us in a short bit. But Lance, can you just tell us a bit about your toilet technology?
Well, the Envirolu, we are quite proud of it. We think it's an immediate response to our sanitation challenges that we have as a country. And it is a very old company. So the technology was initiated 21 years ago. And 21 years later, we are sitting with a product that uses two elements, being wind and sun, to dehydrate and evaporate. So it's a simple exercise of dehydration and evaporation. So what we, in a nutshell, have as a technology is a waterless sanitation system, which means no flushing, zero waste of water. Secondly, it's 100% environmental friendly.
All right. Yeah, Lance Joel, we will come back with that after the break. But first, let's take a break and question time. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Zoom into Africa. This is Burundi. The president is Mr. Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundi got independent from Belgium on 1st July in 1962. The population is more than 8 million people. One of Burundi's major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is Burundi franc.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today in studio, Dr. Prex Govender, Deputy Chair of the South African Human Rights Commission, Lance Joel, Managing Director at Envirolu, and joining us from our Pretoria studio is Sputnik Radau, the Director Media Liaison at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Perhaps starting with you, Dr. Prex Govender, because you just joined us. What sort of work is the Human Rights Commission doing around research on toilets in South Africa?
Well, we approach it from the point of view of the rights of the human right to sanitation. And we've done work on it since 2009 when we received our first complaint, which, if you recall, related to unenclosed toilets that were built in the Western Cape, followed up by unenclosed toilets built in the Free State, which the Commission investigated and made findings on, that both municipalities had to enclose those toilets in a way that upheld dignity, clean environment and privacy. But we also linked it to the systemic problem which exists across the entire country of the right to adequate sanitation, to sanitation that upholds human dignity. And we found that what we asked for was a report from the presidency on what was the status of the right to sanitation in every single municipality across South Africa, as well as what was government's plan to address that right. But in addressing the right to sanitation, what we found was that, and what we know, is that rights are indivisible and interdependent and interrelated. So you couldn't look at sanitation without looking at water, at health, at education, at the issue of the right to safety of girls and women, and of everyone, and the issues of decent human settlements. You can't have decent, proper toilets if you don't have decent human settlements. And you can't address the issue of human settlements unless you address the issue of apartheid spatial geography. And so the indivisibility of rights became very clear through the work we've done. We've dealt with numerous complaints across the country in a number of provinces that relate to the lack of adequate sanitation, and as well as water, as well as other rights. But I think particularly in terms of today being Toilets Day, we've dealt with a number of complaints which we've resolved. But what we really have been focusing on is what's the systemic response from government to addressing these problems, and that's what we've pushed for. Our report, which we launched earlier this year, was dedicated to the memory of Michael Kumape. If you remember the child, the 6-year-old boy who died in the school toilet. And we've had in this week another incident which has come to light of a little girl, also 6 years old, falling into a toilet, thankfully this time surviving, but her dignity being shattered by that experience. And I suppose what both those horrible experiences point to is the dreadful reality that children and many people across our country experience every day, because those are two cases that came to the public attention. But there are many cases that we know that happen every day, and that communities watching this, that people watching this know that every day this is happening to their children, and it's totally unacceptable.
Spunik Ratau, we're hearing here about children who have fallen into pit latrines, one dying. What is the government's plan to address the problem of pit latrines in South Africa and the right really to sanitation in South Africa?
Yes, thank you very much for the input from Dr. Govender. Part of what we're looking at, obviously, is the eradication of all kinds of sanitation that do not speak to the dignity of people. And one of those, obviously, is the issue of the pit latrines. The other one is the issue of the bucket toilets, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that we need to look at is that what especially since the new dispensation has come in, or rather the new term of government has started in the middle of this year, one of the things that the current minister has requested is during her interactions with the provincial governments, those that she has met, and as she pushes on to meet others, is that all of us must move towards a plan that will say what are the things that we need to do and how soon can we make those things happen. And one of the things that has happened is that in the department itself, that issue of putting together a 10-year plan has already started and is in place, which will look at all the kinds of sanitation that can be put up in different places, understanding as well that not all communities can have can have the same kind of sanitation. Where we cannot be able to have waterborne sanitation, what are the solutions, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we also did, if you can remember that at the beginning of August, there was the Water and Sanitation Summit that was held in Boksburg under the leadership of the minister, where thereafter she actually directed the Water Research Commission to request for information, and those adverts were out there in the papers, to request for information around the issue of the delivery of alternative and new technologies around sanitation. And I suppose that people like EnviroLoo could have made their inputs there, and out of that information that the Water Research Commission will be collating, then that will form part of the resolution to some of these issues that we are seeing. The indignity of especially the girl children, who are sometimes even deprived of time to go to school when they have their monthly cycles, is one of the things that is at the top of mind of the department and ultimately of government. Because for every day that one girl child loses at school, it has got a ripple effect. And when you think about the number of school girls that are there that may be affected and ultimately impacted upon by the fact that they are not able to go to school at certain times of each month. Yeah. All of that has become an untenable situation and completely unacceptable, and therefore the government is set on working to resolving these issues. All right.
Lance Joel, your toilets, you are working with schools and you've installed some in schools as well. Can you just tell us about the chemical processes that ensure that they are hygienic for our schools?
Perhaps just to link up to the issue that was raised, for us as EnviroLoo, the recent incidents of the kids falling into pits is really regrettable and very unfortunate. As manufacturers, we are really trying our best and continuously improving our product to respond to avoid such instances.
Okay, quickly, Lance, the process that ensures that they are hygienic for our schools. The chemical process, that is.
Well, our toilets we don't use chemicals. And that's the point I was getting to, is that the technology that we have, we don't use toilets, we don't flush. There's a separation of the solid waste from the liquids, and there's a dehydration and evaporation. So during that dehydration and evaporation, it removes all of the risky elements that is unhygienic, etc. But in terms of our toilet itself, its structure, very hygienic. It is a first-class, decent sanitation solution.
All right. Question time. We'll be right back after this short break, and we'll continue with our discussion on World Toilet Day.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You are still watching Question Time with Ms. Phumelele Zondi, standing in for Mpho Tsedu. My guests today in studio are Dr. Prex Govender, Deputy Chair at the South African Human Rights Commission, Lance Joel, Managing Director at EnviroLu, and joining us from our Pretoria studio is Sputnik Radau, Director Media Liaison at the Department of Water and Sanitation. Dr. Prex Govender, can you just tell us about the rights-based approach to sanitation? Why is this necessary?
Because first and foremost, it's about human beings, and a rights-based approach is centered on human beings. So there has to be consultation, there has to be meaningful consultation with those who are directly affected. So in the provision of toilets, what kind of toilets those are they suitable? The people who are directly affected know what their rights are, know what suits them, knows what will work for them, and knows what will undermine dignity. So public participation, meaningful consultation is critical. That's the problem that led to the unenclosed toilets. There was no meaningful participation or consultation, as the High Court found. So the second is the issue of accountability, of government being accountable to communities, to human beings across our country, to listening to people who are poor, not just listening to people who are powerful and wealthy. So if you take the issue of sanitation, when government has contracts businesses to provide sanitation, how are they monitored to ensure that the human rights of people who are using those toilets, that it's clean, that it's accessible, so that somebody with disabilities can get into that toilet. We've seen toilets where there are no lights inside the toilet, yet no windows. We've seen toilets where there's no water outside the toilet or inside the toilet. We've seen toilets that are a long distance away from where people live, which a wheelchair can't come into, etc. So we've seen a young girl leave her wheelchair outside the toilet, crawl into the toilet, use the toilet, and crawl back out and get onto her wheelchair. So those really undermine human dignity.
All right. Sputnik Radau, let's bring you in there. One of the Millennium Development Goals is to ensure that adequate sanitation is provided. Are we on track on that as South Africa?
In terms of numbers, and as the Minister indicated during her input at the NCOP debate on sanitation a couple of months ago, where initially our intention was that by the end of 2014 we shall have achieved the numbers that we would have wanted in terms of delivery of sanitation.
And are we on track? Are we going to achieve those numbers?
No, the minister did make the point that we shall not be able to achieve those, and that is why she, humbly requested that we relook at that, and that we look at the period of 2015-16 as being able to deliver on those basic numbers that we needed to. But it is not just about numbers. It is also about the type of sanitation that must be delivered, and the dignity that we talk about. As our payoff line says in the department, water is life, but sanitation is dignity. That is the driving thinking behind the type of work that we must be able to achieve as a department and ultimately as government.
When it comes to initiatives like Envirolu as the Department of Water and Sanitation, what do you think of such initiatives?
That is why I did indicate that, at the end of the Water and Sanitation Summit, the minister did ask that the Water Research Commission put out a request for information for people with new technologies to bring them forward. One of the things that we need to do is put them to the test. And these people that have got these new technologies must come forward and say what kind of technologies they have and be or receptive to those technologies being tested, where they will be taken to communities, where they will be assessed, and where at the end of the day, based on the assessment, based on their performance, and based on the requirements of the different communities, then the requisite technologies will be able to be procured for the different communities.
Yes. Lance, have you engaged government on your product on Envirolu?
Well, yes, as I've indicated earlier, government is our biggest client.
Okay.
So we have good business come from government.
And what's in front of us on the table? That's something that comes out eventually.
Well, as I said to you earlier, through the process of dehydration and evaporation, there is no flushing. So what comes out of the toilet is this compost-like material, which I wanted to say to you earlier is fairly safe. It could be disposed of safely, or alternatively, it could be used as a compost-like material. So this is what ultimately comes out of the system. And that's why we said it's 100% environmental friendly. There's no contamination of the surrounding soil. There is no contamination of the underground water. So we have interacted with government, and we have made a comprehensive submission to the Water Research Commission, and we're really hoping for a positive outcome.
All right, Dr. Prexgavanda, quickly, last word from you. How can we make water and sanitation conversations around it fashionable? Can we?
Well, it's interesting. We had a meeting yesterday with the COCTA and water and sanitation officials, where we talked about one of our key recommendations from our report, which was to have a national campaign on the issue of budgets, integrated development plans, and government contracts or tenders. A campaign that will popularize the information so anyone can access what is happening to their money,
yes,
and who's paying for what.
Yes.
And so that's a critical part of it. There was a very positive response to that. And I think that campaign can make people begin to demand changes. Because I think that the issue of FIFA World Cup, we built the stadiums. Those toilets in children's schools, pit toilets, there can be no excuse for not fixing them within the time limit.
Dr. Prexgavanda from the South African Human Rights Commission, Lance Joel from Envirolu, and Sputnik Radau joining us in Pretoria from the Department of Water and Sanitation. Thank you very much for joining us today. That was Question Time for today. A big thank you to our guests and to you for watching the show. We welcome your feedback via email, questiontime@sabc.co.za, or you can tweet us. Our Twitter handle is @QuestionTime24. From Ms. Phumelele Zondi and the rest of the crew, have yourself a wonderful time. Bye-bye.